Hello, and welcome to today's edition of the Live and Invest Overseas podcast. I'm Kat Kalashian. I am the senior editor correspondent based here in Paris, and joining me today is Con Murphy, who you may remember from past webinars that we've done, past little podcasts we've done with him. Con is originally Irish, and though he's lived all over the world and done many things all over the world, he is now based again in Ireland, where I also lived for about 7 years of my life. And while Ireland isn't necessarily one of our top recommendations for retirement right now, simply because the Irish government has made it so onerous to be able to qualify, to be eligible financially to live there, it cuts out, I would say, a good portion of the population in terms of being eligible for residency there. And despite how difficult it is to live there full time, it is still an option for part time living, of course. And so there are many options, and it may be an attractive place to retire, even part time, for some people. So we're going to talk to Khan today about his homeland and all of the quirks and crazy things that you'll wish you had known before you tried to make a move to Ireland. And because I do have a bit of my own experience being an expat in Ireland, I'll be chiming in every now and then just to add my 2 cents to things. But for the moment, we're going to give the microphone to Khan and take it away.
Thanks, Kat. It's great to be back again. As you mentioned there, I've spent 15 years living around the world as an expat. And one of the things I noticed, really, it wasn't until I came back to Ireland that I really started to notice, as you said, the idiosyncrasies of Ireland. And it's being away actually enables you to spot the kind of weird and wonderful things of your own hometown, your own home when you do come home. So I suppose what are the things you should be aware of before you arrive to Ireland? Well, the few immediate ones will be the first one will be the Irish sense of humor. It can take a little while to get used to. It's self-depreciating, it's sarcastic, and a little nihilistic. But once you get a handle on it, it really is what defines the Irish. We'll be touching on more on that later. The most immediate thing you notice when you come to Ireland is the weather, and this is one of the drawbacks. One of the certainly things you have to be aware of before you arrive is that you can have every type of weather all in one single day. You can have sun, storms, rain, sleet, and snow all in one day in Ireland. Sometimes it doesn't always happen that way, but we really have. We have a lot of weather packed into a small space of time sometimes. So it takes people aback, especially if you're looking for a sun holiday. Ireland isn't for you. You get good
And in
weather.
fact, even if you are following where the sun is supposed to be, I was based in Waterford, which is part of what is known as the sunny southeast, which I guess in relation to the rest of Ireland may be true, but if you're used to real sunshine, the sunny southeast is probably not going to deliver what you want. And I mean, it's definitely a cliche. I think everyone in the world has heard, the joke about, the old Irish man saying, "Oh, it's just a bit of mist." But that really is actually true. Every single day, I remember going to school and somebody, it could be bucketing down rain, and one of the teachers will be like, "Ah, it's just a bit of mist." And so I feel like unless the Irish are in the middle of a hurricane, they won't actually call it rain. They'll just call it mist all year long.
True. But the one thing that Ireland does have, dissimilar to places like Canada or even parts of the States, is it doesn't really get that cold. We don't get snow that often. We don't, if we do, it's only a couple of inches. When it freezes, it's only a frost usually. So we don't have that kind of extreme, but we do get a lot of water spread out over the year. So that's something to be aware of.
Exactly. And I will mention one other thing on the topic of weather. It took my mother and I a few years of living in Ireland to realize that we had succumbed to seasonal depression, which I think even, back in the 90s, that was probably barely even a term. People didn't recognize the fact that UV light really does have an impact on one's mood. And I think after a couple years there, my mother was the one who first noticed, in the depths of winter, couldn't figure out why she was just so lethargic, just had no motivation for anything, just couldn't be bothered with anything. And she took a business trip, I think it was actually to Panama. and came back, a whole new woman. And she put two and two together and realized she was just desperately in need of some sunshine. So it's another thing to be aware of, that you're definitely going to miss the sun, and you might want to factor in a couple of trips down to the Mediterranean or something to keep up the UV index.
Definitely, it is. Yeah, it's something you have to be aware of. All right. The other points about Ireland are you're not friends with an Irish person until they make fun of you, or as we say in Ireland, take the piss out of you. Irish people can be quite friendly, but you're not friends with the Irish until they feel comfortable enough to tease you. It's good-natured teasing, and then you've really integrated into the Irish community when they feel comfortable enough to make fun of you, because they don't do that to people they dislike. It's only to your friends that you make playful fun of like that. Um, the thing, if you've ever heard of the GAA or the Gaelic Athletics, they're the traditional Irish sports. They're crazy for them over here. But Irish hurling, Irish football, and camogie, they're great sports to watch. You'd have to be a little bit insane to play them yourself, especially hurling, which is played with a kind of a flattened cricket bat, which they swing at each other, running around the field at full speed. But the Irish love it. It's an amateur sport. People don't really get paid to play it, but it has a bigger following, and people are more passionate about the Irish sports than they are about any other sport in Ireland. So when you're in Ireland, definitely go see a hurling match. It's quite an eye opener. Um, there are When people think about Ireland from years ago, especially if you know Ireland from the television and the movies, you think about Ireland and the Troubles and the IRA. The Republican days in Ireland are over. They've been over since I've been a small child. So there isn't this big, a lot Americans come and wonder if there's still this animosity with the English. That's all gone. It's gone a long time ago. The only time you hear any about that is in the pub. Sometimes they are still sing rebel songs, but they'll have to do so with English people these days. So, thankfully that sad saga, part of Ireland's history has come to an end. Kat, we were talking last week, and you pointed out a couple of things that I hadn't realized was even that weird. But now that you mention it, I suppose it is really. You gave us a short list of butter on sandwiches. You said that's very odd to Americans. I
When
find it
my
very
my
odd.
family and I moved there, we would go down to the little corner shop right next to the office, and we'd get the sandwiches. I mean, it could be breakfast sandwiches or lunch sandwiches, no matter what. And it was, well, and the funny thing is they're also called bacon buddies. And so it's just a bacon sandwich with butter, basically. And the other thing was the bap rolls, that are basically just a giant circle of bread covered in flour. I mean, it's I've never seen that anywhere else in the world. But no matter what kind of sandwich you want, it'll come with butter on it, unless you specifically tell them no butter.
I don't know how that's even an issue. I don't know how you couldn't have butter on sandwiches. But anyway, there are cultural divides right there. Your other one was potatoes with everything, and I know it's a cliche, but that's actually true. I eat potatoes, or maybe even two forms of potatoes with most meals. So you can't beat a good spud, really. It's
Any restaurant you go to, any meal you get, in my school cafeteria. In my school cafeteria, every single day we had three kinds of potatoes. Always baked potatoes, or always baked potatoes, and usually a mash, and then usually, some other form of potatoes that they've figured out. And I mean, that's pretty typical of, if you go to like a carvery or a buffet, half the thing might be different kinds of potatoes. So it is such a cliche, but it's not something to be taken for granted.
yeah. Luckily, these days we do have other restaurants. We've got all the usual chains, and there is fine dining now in Ireland. Traditionally, the Irish food was just everything boiled until it kind of fell apart. But so that's changed. But the potatoes in anything Irish, or in any mid-range, or in any restaurant, there'll be lots of potatoes on offer. And your last point there, we were talking last week, was the crazy tiny Irish roads.
Yes.
Those are that is true. We've got some more motorways now; they're a bit better kept, but yeah, some of those roads are, especially in the more remote spots. Yeah, it can be quite a trip driving around. It's nearly like a go kart track whizzing around the place. So that takes a little bit of getting used to too. But
Yeah,
it's
and what's interesting about the way that roads are, I guess they're just kind of carved out from, hundreds of years ago, more for like a
goodness,
cart
yeah.
path. And so there are these hedges on either side of, I mean, most any given road, I would say, unless it's a highway or a new road, there will be these hedges that could be 6 or more feet tall. So you can't really see, and ahead of you, you can't really see behind you, you can't really, see around the bend. I remember being grateful for those hedges in the end, though, because it meant that when you went sliding off the road, something caught your car at the corner. You didn't just fall directly down into a ditch or go plowing off into a field. But I probably shouldn't admit how many times my mother drove the car into multiple hedges driving from the office to our home, which was a good ways out into the country. And I'm sure those roads are much better now, but still, it was
Country
difficult.
roads, yeah, country roads are still a bit of still fun to drive on. I can tell you that. All right. What else but Ireland? You won't, it's hard to believe it, but Ireland is one of the golfing. There's loads of golfing in Ireland, and it's got some of the best links golf courses in the world. We have the Ryder Cup coming in a couple of years here, and it's been held here several times in the past. So there's lots of great golf courses if you're into golf. Similarly, it's not something that people really think about that much because the water isn't warm here, but it's also one of the surfing capitals of Europe. We're right at the edge of Europe. We're facing the Atlantic Ocean, the waves coming from all the way from the Americas. I mean, they break on Ireland first. So we have some great surf championships, and there's some of the biggest waves that can be found in the world can be found off the coast of Ireland. So you obviously need a wetsuit because it's cold, but if you're into surfing, it's there. Similarly, you don't think about Ireland for its beaches, but we've got hundreds of miles of most of the time empty beaches, unless of course there's a heat wave. Then when all the beaches close to a town will be packed.
A
But
heat wave in Ireland, though, that's
the heat
breaking
wave in Ireland, we're talking
65,
something in the
70
70s.
Fahrenheit.
Yeah, if it breaks 70, everyone takes off work and goes to the beach.
Yeah.
Uh, so,
Well, and
and
it doesn't even you don't need a heat wave. In Ireland, one of the funniest things that my family and I still talk about, one of the craziest things that we discovered was the Christmas Day swim, which to us just sounds like utter madness. Like, how did you all not die of pneumonia thousands of years ago doing this? Because every Christmas, no matter what, every single person I knew of every age would go down to the beach and jump in the water. I mean, not that they would actually go swimming, they probably wouldn't even get their hair wet, but they would jump in, even if it was only up to the knees, and splash about a bit just to say that they did it.
we had the Wim Hof ice method going decades before anyone else. That's true.
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed since coming back, it wasn't there when I left. I left in the early 2000s. Was that microbreweries and microdistilleries have sprung up. All maybe you don't even remember that, Cat.
No.
There's now more than half a dozen microbreweries and a couple of distilleries in my hometown here in Limerick that weren't there 15 years ago. We had the Guinness and the Murphys and the Smithwicks and the usual Irish beers that you would know, but now there's all sorts available and all sorts of small distilleries and craft distilleries. So there's a great craft trade grown up around that, which I think is a great bonus. But previously, unless you like Guinness or cider, really the Irish beers didn't offer a huge amount. So that's that. For people who don't know Ireland, Dublin is the capital city, capital of the Republic of Ireland. But more than 1.5 million people live there, which is over a third of the entire population. So there is a little bit of Dublin and the rest of the country feeling about Ireland. The Dubs generally stay in Dublin, and everyone outside beyond the Pale. Actually, that's where beyond the Pale came from as a term. Everyone beyond the Pale to Dublin people are what we affectionately call boggers or culchies, which would be people from the country in Ireland. So there's that a little bit of friendly prejudice amongst people who hail from outside and inside Dublin. Other places to have a look at, there's County Galway and Galway City on the west coast. It's part of the arts capital of Ireland. It's university town. It's it's on the edge of Connemara, which is
Some of the most dramatic coastlines, I think, in the world.
really windswept, and really, when you think about the postcards of Ireland, the donkeys and the thatch cottages and the rocky fields, that's around Galway, and it really is. It's kind of a distilled Irishness of the country. So a lot of people choose to move out there. There's lots of poets and artists, foreigners, painters, anything, or people who are into organic farming and want to get back to the land, they move out to the west, out towards the coast there, because it really, there's something really distinctive about it. Similarly, County Cork down the bottom. Cork City is the second largest city in Ireland. It's really has a very strong culture. The people from County Cork really love it down there. It is an amazing spot of Ireland. It's the southernmost part of Ireland. There's lots of sailing down there. It's known for its great restaurants. A lot of people vacation down there because it's so scenic. Um, I think you'll find a lot of these spots are on the coast, like Kerry, County Kerry. I was there this just a couple of days ago. This weekend, I was down in County Kerry, down in Castle Gregory, in a remote. It's one of the more remote or less populated parts of Ireland. Once again, it's dramatic scenery, empty beaches, lovely coastline and mountains. Another postcard picture version of Ireland, and it's those are the spots that I choose to go to. And County Clare just beside it. They're the places I go on my vacations when I'm in Ireland. They're great fun, great people, great pubs, plenty of outdoors things to do. Just great. Something that's been big news recently, you probably heard about it over there too, is this Brexit and its impact on Ireland and Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. Maybe I should have explained that before I got started. Ireland, there's a small corner of Ireland in the north that's still ruled by England, or still part of the United Kingdom. And because England and the United Kingdom just left EU, there's a bit of a brouhaha going on between Northern Ireland and England, and about customs, and is Northern Ireland in EU now, or is it in the UK? So they're still thrashing out those details. People were worried about it for a while, but it doesn't seem like I don't think it's going to come to much. There's no border between Southern and Northern Ireland now, ever since the Troubles ended nearly 30 years ago now. So you wouldn't know. You can drive to Northern Ireland, you wouldn't know you're entering Northern Ireland, except for there's different license plates on the cars, and the post boxes are a different color. That's the only way you tell. We touched on food previously. Before, it was once fast food was once limited to Chippers, which is places that sell burgers and chips and fish and chips, but now, and boiled potatoes, as we mentioned before, and cabbage. But now there are restaurants and gourmet restaurants all around Ireland, so you're not going to starve while you're over here. One of the other things to be aware of in Ireland is the cost of living. As Kat mentioned, that the finance requirements to move to Ireland are fairly high. We're going to touch on that in a little while. And things like rent, the cost of property and houses, and alcohol in pubs is quite expensive in Ireland. Things like food, many other things aren't in Ireland. I find insurance very cheap. Medical care, my medical insurance for my family is, and it's a very good medical insurance, is less than $2,000 a year, and it's got practically no deductibles and covers everything I'd ever need in Ireland or across Europe. So those things are cheaper, but rent, buying property, and alcohol, there's a lot of taxes on that. So it's something to be aware of. Fuel costs are high in Ireland, but they're high across Europe, and they're higher everywhere now these days. But typically, you'd be expecting to pay nearly double what you guys in the States are paying for your gas. We call it petrol or diesel. But that is not unusual. Americans just haven't known what the rest of the world pays for gasoline for the last 30 years, because you produce so much yourselves. One of the things you'll notice in Ireland is we don't have an armed police force. All our police, we call Gardaí, or the Garda Síochána. In Irish, that means the Guardians of Peace. There's a very different culture here. The guards are not feared. They're kind of somewhat made fun of, but they're unarmed. They don't need to be armed. There are some police that do have access to firearms in case there is serious issues going on, but because the police are unarmed, situations don't escalate. We found that Ireland's very happy, and I think it's the envy of the rest of Europe, really, that Ireland has an unarmed police force that is very approachable, and they're very laid back and community involved police force. So while we make fun of them and don't like being caught speeding, there's no real friction with the police force and the general population over here. They're generally a nice enough bunch who are out there to help. It does help that we've got very low violent crime in Ireland. It's not non-existent, but I mean, our murder rate is about a seventh of what it is in the States. It's just how it is. Other things to be aware of in Ireland, especially if you're in Galway, parts of Mayo, on the west coast of Ireland, there's the Gaeltachts. They're communities and areas in Ireland where they still speak Irish as in their daily lives. they can obviously speak English, and won't they'll speak to you in English if you can't speak Irish. But it's an effort to keep the Irish culture and heritage alive. So if you were interested in listening to Irish, or God knows, learning some Irish, you can go to these areas. There's Irish language schools. You could live there. There's government incentives to set up business in the Gaeltachts. And yeah, it's just a bit different, really. If you want to hear, especially with Irish heritage, come and hear the language that was spoken hundreds of years ago. We all learn it in school nowadays, but
Well,
it's not
funnily,
spoken.
I actually had to learn it as well when I was in school there. Until I think it was a couple years into living there, we realized that since I wasn't actually an Irish citizen, I wasn't necessarily required. I wasn't as obligated as the other students were. But right, it's still taught in schools. It's the mandatory second language. I did study it for several years. I had a teacher who, even after I was exempted from taking the classes, I had a teacher who refused to let anyone leave the classroom unless they asked to leave in Gaelic. So to this day, I still remember how to say, "Can I go to the bathroom, please?" in
I was going to say that's
Gaelic.
probably one of the few ones it's been 25 years now for me. So yeah, that's one of the few ones I remember as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. So it is still very much a part of life. And what's interesting, I always thought, was the reason that, I mean, it's obviously to keep the cultural heritage alive, the historical heritage alive. But what the actual practical side of it, the reason that everybody needs to speak it is because of the Gaeltachts. So, for example, if you're in the public sector, if you're a policeman, a fireman, a radio announcer, a TV announcer, if you're anybody that has to communicate with large masses of people or strangers on any given base, any given day on whatever, for whatever reason, you need to be able to speak Gaelic in case you get called to a Gaeltacht. So, it's required. I think higher levels of it are required for people that are in these kind of professions. But that's kind of the reason is, Ireland wants to make sure that there is some kind of common denominator for everybody, and that common denominator should really be Irish. It shouldn't be English. So it's a fascinating way to keep the legacy alive.
Other important parts of Ireland, I mentioned healthcare in Ireland previously, but yes, healthcare is very high quality. It is not as expensive in the States. If you don't have insurance, it's quite a bit cheaper, but it's still not cheap. If you've got insurance, obviously, and there's good insurance coverage in Ireland, it can be very reasonable. It's not a problem. Residency, as Kat mentioned, the requirements are that it's quite onerous, really. You need to show an income of 50,000 euros a year. You need to show a lump sum if you're arriving in Ireland of minimum about 20,000 euros to show that you can, they say enough to make a deposit on a house, but that's a bit subjective. So it's about 20 something thousand euros in savings, and you have to have health insurance to come here to get residency. So that makes Ireland expensive compared to any other, most of the other jurisdictions that we cover.
Right. The
Um,
capital outlay is a lot higher than in any other place, regardless of how much it actually costs to live there, which would not be anything close to
oh
what
God,
they're
no,
requiring.
no, no. It's just a hurdle that's put in place.
Yeah.
If you do move to Ireland and you do get residency, or eventually become a citizen, Ireland's got a progressive tax system. Income tax starts, it's income tax free up to about 8,000 euros. After from there until nearly 40,000 euros, you're taxed about 22 or 23% all in, and above that, you're taxed at 40, mid 40s, up to it's 50% taxation after you're earning about 80,000 euros a year. So I mean, it gets expensive in Ireland. Is another thing you need to be aware of if you become tax resident in Ireland. The services are quite good. Say the healthcare, the schooling is free, education is free, and the education system is exceptionally high quality in most of the country. But yeah, you pay for it in your taxes. Other things like property tax. We introduced property tax last year. My house is worth about over $300,000. The property tax is about $300 a year, so it's 1,000 of the actual value. So it's very cheap property taxes. So there's pluses and minuses. One of the things I often get asked about any country I go to is guns and firearms in Ireland, and I said no, the cops are unarmed. You can get a shotgun or a rifle if you join a gun club to go hunting or to go sport shooting, but there's no such thing as firearms, sidearms in Ireland for civilians. It just not it doesn't happen. So it's not possible. If you have got a gun collection and you want to bring it, Ireland is not the place. It just the other things about Ireland now, I suppose, for a little bit of fun, really, it's the colloquial sayings here, the slang, the phrases people use every day here is one of the things you need to get used to. We speak English, but it's English, but not really English as you know it.
You'll be shocked. I was there as a child, from the ages of about 7 to 14, and when I went there, I could not be understood and I couldn't understand any of my classmates because everybody speaks in a slang. So it's not the accent that you're trying to get over, and it's not that it is a different language, but the slang. It's like going to, I don't know, Brooklyn or something from like the 1970s, and you have no idea what anyone is talking about. And so it took me a while to learn how to adapt. And then when I would go back to the States, nobody would understand what I was saying because I only knew how to speak with these Irish isms now at this point. So we're going to talk about a few of these. And while it is having a bit of fun, and it's definitely, you're not going to go to Ireland and need an interpreter. You will be understood and you will manage to understand other people. But as you dig in a bit more and you start interacting with people a bit more, you're going to notice all of these terms coming up very, very regularly. And I think it will be a little helpful to have a bit of a crash course in some of the Irish slang. And so we are going to put all of these up on the screen for you, so you don't need to we don't need to spell them out for you, and you can have a little laugh going through the list. But go ahead, Con. What are your favorites?
Yeah, some of the ones that get the most strange looks from. Yeah, as in people probably won't use these words to you, but you'll hear people talking amongst themselves, and you'll be wondering if someone's talking about crack or having the crack. It's not drugs they're talking about; it's having fun. Having the crack is just having a great old time. How it's
or
going
what's
there.
The crack?
Or what's the crack? What's going on?
Yeah.
What's happening. Another term you hear, someone will say it was cat or it was cat melogian. Which means it's just absolutely awful. It could be an event, something that's going on. It could be someone singing. The actual the image is someone taking a cat, and it's a sound a cat would make if you tried to use it as an accordion.
That is crazy. I have never heard that one ever.
Haven't you? Yeah, it's that. It's usually about a sound, so if you try to play the accordion on a cat. The cat melogian is one of them too. As I mentioned earlier, if someone refers to a culshie or a bogger, that's me. If someone from out in the countryside, if someone said grand is a universal word for it. How are you doing? Grand, or it's grand. Grand is a okay, good, fine. Grand can be used for in many circumstances.
It's definitely the preeminent word, other than any other affirmative word in the English language. More than any other word, you'll hear grand. It's just the answer to everything, if it's affirmative, is grand.
Another one you need to be aware of: if you ask someone to do something like, "Would you mind? Will you stay late after work and help me out with this?" And if they, depends on how they say it, but usually if they say, "I will, yeah," if they say it kind of flatly, if they look at you sideways and go, "I will, yeah," that means basically pissed off. There's no chance they're doing that. So that's one where people get very confused. They turn up after work looking for the Irish guys, and they've all left because they had no intention of coming. So that's a little bit of the sarcasm coming out. Slagging, as I mentioned earlier, that's teasing. Usually just good-natured teasing. I mean, it's not abusive. Friends slag each other. Other words you'll come across is banjaxed. That'll be broken or smashed, broken around repair. Someone might tell you they're going to the Jacks. Jacks is they're going to the toilet. You will hear of an Egypt, which is the Irish version of an idiot, and you'll hear that word used an awful lot too around there. If you don't like someone or someone's acting very unhelpfully, they'll be called a wanker, which is a derogatory term for an objectionable person. So that's not something you want to hear yourself called. I don't know if you use the American term "giving out." My mother was always giving out to me, which is just telling off or giving me a tongue
Talking
lashing.
to.
Yeah, yeah. Someone tells you to give it a lash means go on, give it a try. Just do it, try it. That's how it goes. You quite often hear people say feck, which is just a more polite version of the FUCK
Yeah,
word.
but I mean, also, I will just say that the Irish are, I think, a little bit abnormally fond of swearing, of especially the
Oh
F
yeah,
word. I won't
oh
say
yeah,
it here and get us censored on our YouTube channel, but I didn't realize it when I lived there, and then when I would overhear Irish tourists, for example, in whatever city I was in, it was like every second or third word would be the F word, and it's just used, it's not, nothing about it is in anger, it's used for emphasis.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. As I said before, people, um, yeah, that's you know, people don't usually get verbally aggressive. You know, when people, if someone is being mean to you, it usually means they're friends and they're teasing you. People won't generally be verbally abusive like that. That's true. Other ones you'll hear is acting the maggot, which means you're not taking things seriously. Um, Another universal word is fair play.
Fair
Fair play
play,
to you, which means
yeah.
well done, thank you. It means go on. It's a universal word for, that's good, that's great, thank you
Yeah,
very much. That one thrown around. You'll
another
hear,
kind of affirmative saying.
oh yeah, it's a fair play to you. Another one that confuses people is deadly. If something is deadly, means it's brilliant, excellent. It doesn't mean that it's bad or dangerous. It means it's you say the whatever it was deadly. It
You're
means it was.
saying brilliant as a synonym, and while I think nowadays I would understand brilliant to be, I think that's more common, or maybe I'm older and I have a little bit more awareness. But back in the day, I couldn't figure out brilliant. Brilliant to an American means shiny or incredibly
Right,
smart,
there we go.
genius. But yeah, it's so brilliant was another one that that got to me as well.
Yeah, another one. Other ones would be stall the ball, which means hold on a second. Uh, I don't know if you know the terms manky, which is
Yeah,
dirty,
Nike was a lot.
dirty or disgusting. A yoke is anything. Is that yoke there? It means
A
anything
yoke.
that you're talking about that you can't remember the name of that yoke or
Yeah, absolutely anything. A thing. It really just
yeah,
means thing.
the
And
thing.
but it would just all the time, everything is a yoke. And especially for, I think, younger kids are using it just constantly out of laziness, really. Instead of making your brain think for the actual word, you just say yoke. And I could not figure that out for the longest time. And it is everything, everywhere, all the time.
Yep, yep, yep. Another one you'll hear is someone will say to you, your man or your one, which is kind of slang for your man or your lady, or your woman. They don't mean your man or your one. It means the person whom I was talking
That
to.
we're
So I say,
referring to.
Kat, your man, that we were talking to last week, your man or your one, which
Yeah.
means that person that we were talking to, not your friend or someone that's belongs to you.
Another one on this line is just ye. So I had forgotten about this one until last week. We had a conference call with one of our Irish colleagues, and every single time he would refer to us all, or even just one of us, it was ye. Ye know about this statistic. Ye are familiar with, and it's a funny thing that I had completely forgotten. And it's not the kind of thing that would really confuse you, but it's just a very, very cute Irishism that you'll hear it constantly. It has replaced the word for all of you, I think.
Uh, yes, yeah, we've certainly words like that. Other ones that you'll hear referred, hopefully not hear in reference to yourself, is gobshite, which means someone who's full of it, absolutely full of BS, a fool. So if someone's a gobshite, they're not nasty, they're not dangerous, they're just a total wally that you don't want anything to do with. Similarly, if you call someone a tool, it means they're a fool. Um, it's if someone says it's a fine soft day, it means, as Kat mentioned, it means it's pouring rain. Yeah. Someone asks you how's she cutting? It's in the farmer's term for how's it going? How's she cutting? Other words, just like we said, deadly earlier. Savage is also another word for very good. And it's savage night out. It's not a bad thing. It's a we use the word class as great. Other words you'll hear is people refer to someone, it's bang on, or this person is bang on. It means they're sound. It means they're reliable. They're good people. I would just mention sound. Yeah, that's sound can be used referring to you can say sound for to someone if they do something nice to you. It means thank you very much. That's a good solid from you.
Or it can also be an adjective like, or a noun, sorry, she is sound out, or he's sound out.
Sound
It's
out, yeah,
sound out.
sound out, yeah, absolutely.
But that was
great
another
word.
one that for me, I couldn't translate once I got back to America. I couldn't figure out what word I should use instead of sound. And in America, it means nothing to anyone to say someone is sound, other than they're a solid,
Oh yeah, yeah,
person with a foundation.
yeah, it's definitely slightly different in Ireland. Definitely,
Yeah.
they're good. They're another one now. If you hear a reference, there's hundreds of these words, but I'll give you a couple of the top ones. For being drunk, locked, flutered, mouldy, in a hoop, off your head, hammered, piss. I suppose you'd know that one. That all means you're drunk. We've got plenty in there. If you want someone to take you someplace in their car, you'll ask them to give you a lift. You won't ask them to give you a ride.
Right.
Is that
yes.
Yeah? To give you a lift is, will you take me someplace in your car? Give me a ride is sexual intercourse. So that's definitely one you want to be sure of.
Another one on that same line of thinking that threw me for a loop as a teenager growing up there was shifting, is to make out, to French
Yeah.
kiss with somebody. But yeah, shifting, I don't know where that could have come from. It's not the most attractive name for making out, but that was another one that you'll hear, oh, they're shifting, or oh, they were shifting, I saw them shifting. Like that's what that means.
Certainly then. All right, how are we doing the time? Are we still good? We've got
Yeah, I'm just gonna give a couple more
Yeah, do.
because some of these ones that I remember so much. So lads was, just any group of people. It's not I think Americans think lads are boys and lasses are girls. Maybe in Scotland, in Ireland, everyone's a lad. All yeah lads. Bursting was what my brother preferred to say when he had to go to the bathroom, because that was what the Irish taught him to say. He was bursting to wee.
Yeah.
A bird, or a bird is a girl, and it's not necessarily a derogatory term. It's kind of like saying a chick, that chick over there. It's not necessarily a bad thing. A slag, though, is definitely a bad thing. You don't want to call a woman a slag or be called a slag. Um, the eat the head off was one that threw me for a bit. To eat the head off is, I think, Con, you had one for this as well. To give out, to be given out to.
To give out. But eat the head off means giving out. It's given out. To eat the head off means you've been lambasted. They've absolutely eaten you alive, basically,
right,
for whatever you did. Yeah.
If you snap at somebody, basically, you're eating their head off.
Eat the head off.
An earwig, which I knew what an earwig was as a little bug, but I never heard the term to earwig as a verb, which is to eavesdrop. Fair play, we did. Grand is fine. Knackered is one that's always used. I'm knackered is to just be very tired. There is also, and this might be regional, Con, in Waterford at least, a knacker is also derogatory, to be a knacker.
Yes, it's a derogatory term to the Irish traveller community.
Yes.
So yeah, that's no longer, that's on PC now, but you need to be aware in case
you'll hear it, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no,
back in the day, I heard it. That was like the go-to insult among kids. Yeah, knacker. So to leg it is the opposite of being knackered. You'd be full of energy and running very fast. The off license. When I used the term liquor store, which was the only term, I think it's the only term Americans have for a place to buy alcohol and take it home. But in Ireland, you've got the off license and the on license. And the off license, you can get your liquor to go off the premises. On the on license, you can get your liquor to be drunk on the premises. So on and off license, you'll hear that. To be shattered was just to be very tired. To be thick. Oh God, yes. Thick was probably the number in the top 5 insults that you'd hear on a daily basis. Don't be thick. Don't be stupid. Don't be daft. Just random things you'll hear sure all the time. Sure, it's grand. Sure, let's go. Sure, let's do, sure is like, I think to an American, sure is just put in everywhere, peppered throughout conversation. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a little Irishism. Um, can't be arsed. I actually used this one in complete seriousness a few weeks ago with my husband, and he has not stopped taking the piss ever since. Because there is no other phrase for it that says it quite so well. It's just such a perfect phrase. It's basically, I can't be asked. I don't want to be, I don't want to do it. I can't be bothered, I guess, is the closest thing. But right, when you say, oh, he couldn't be arsed about it, there's really no better way of saying that. And my husband thought that was the funniest thing. I guess I'd never said it before to him, but I feel like I hear it in my head a lot. Um, and let's see, all of the terms for rain, you'll hear pissing, lashing, spitting, bucketing. So I mean, the Irish are like Inuits with snow. There are a billion names for rain, types of rain, puddles. you know. All right, so those are some of my biggest memories of the language. Oh, the bin. That's an odd one, but the bin to be the trash can. If you say trash can, well, also I have a slightly strong American accent. So when I said trash can to my Irish friends, they made so much fun of me because it was the trash and the can, and it sounds very American. But I had to learn very quickly to say bin, just put something in the bin. It sounds much more polite as well. I like that term.
And as I said before, I mean, people, you will understand what people are saying. These are the slang colloquial words, and they're generally quite polite, and they will repeat themselves if you don't get it first time around. But it's kind of fun, really, how
It is.
the language is used in
Yeah.
different countries.
All right. Well, we are coming up on our time. We've actually gone a bit over, but thank you so much, Con. This was a really fun conversation. Hopefully, we haven't driven people away with the extra length video. But it's always lovely to talk to you, and we'll speak with you again soon. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kat. We'll see you soon.